Funding the partnerships. The EU implements its policies towards Africa by allocating a part of its resources to African institutions, countries and civil societies. Information about funding opportunities can be provided by EU delegations and African ministries. For civil society, it's sometimes easier to ask specialised European NGO platforms such as Concord or EPLO, or alternatively to contact staff at EU institutions. The EU's overall budget, called the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, is financed by member states. The budget is broken down into different budget lines governed by their own legal frameworks. These are called financial instruments. The main financial instruments are divided in geographical and thematic instruments. The European Development Fund is the EU's main financial instrument for providing aid to ACP countries. For historical reasons, the EDF is agreed outside the normal EU budget and uses a different formula for member states' contributions. Some contribute more than others. The biggest contributors in nominal terms are Germany, France and the United Kingdom. Normally, the EDF lasts for 7 years. The budget for 2014 to 2020 amounts to €30.5 billion. The programming of funds is done by EU delegations, DG DevCo and the European External Action Service in dialogue with consultation with partner governments in Africa and civil society. A particularity of the EDF is that disbursements needs to be co-signed off by the ACP countries' representatives and the EU member states. The grant element of the EDF is managed by DG DevCo, while the loan element is managed by the European Investment Bank. The European Neighbourhood instrument has €15.4 billion for the countries of the European Neighbourhood policy for 2014 to 2020. These include North African countries, Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco and Tunisia. The Development Cooperation Instrument has an allocation of €19.7 billion for the next 7 years. Asia, Latin America, the Gulf region and South Africa are eligible for the geographical funds. For thematic funds, such as Local and Non-State Actors Programme, all developing countries are eligible, including African countries. This instrument includes a new Pan-African programme which will finance continent-wide programmes in Africa. In the future, this may be the main funding source for the JAS. Then the EU has thematic instruments for specific uses. Some of the most relevant instruments for Africa are the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, the Instrument for Stability and Peace used in the area of conflict prevention, crisis management and peace building, the Common Foreign and Security Policy and Common Security and Defence Policy covers civilian crisis management operations, parts of military operations, and counter-proliferation policies. The Partnership Instrument provides funding for cooperation with industrialised countries and countries no longer eligible for development money. And the 7th Framework Programme, which has now become Horizon 2020, funds research. This is mainly for European member states, but it's also possible to cooperate with African countries. An example of this is the Irafrica programme. Erasmus Mundus provides scholarships to study in Europe, open to applicants from any part of the world. One of the main challenges for the EU in Africa is to use all of these financial instruments in a coherent manner. The EU's action in the Sahel is a prominent example of such a challenge and how it attempts to overcome them. The EDF and DCI operate under the EU's development policy framework and the Agenda for Change. The Agenda for Change introduced these priorities in 2012. More concentration of aid in a maximum of 3 sectors per country, more differentiation between developing partner countries, and to promote blending, combining EU grant aid with other public and private sector resources, and also joint programming. The EU and its member states have to decide to plan together on the use of their funds.